Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to the Bomb Draft and Pray podcast. I am your host, Pedro Barbosa, and today is another special day. While we have our commentator and co-host, normally Earl, and he is on vacation, on a well-deserved vacation. So we have a stand-in and a person that we were kind of hoping to do a different episode, the first episode with him, but he was kind enough to be here today to talk about F1. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Mr. Jay Mooney. Hi, Jay.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I am nice. And you?
Good. Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite. Very kind.
Yeah, you're always welcome here. So we have today's episode is to discuss the Japanese Grand Prix, and it was an eventful weekend, let's say the least.
Yeah, it's quite a bizarre one, really, wasn't it? It was a funny one watching the whole weekend unfold. It's I guess that typical time of year where the weather starts to play a part, doesn't it, in these kind of situations, these kind of locations. So I didn't expect to see what I saw when I woke up on Sunday morning, but it led to quite an eventful morning.
Yeah, the thing is, on that part of the world, from last weekend, we have a typhoon, I think, and I think it still stands. And MotoGP was at Motegi last week, and they had that kind of weather. So it was the only surprise was that it's extended so much. And it's while we actually have many times rain at Suzuka, on the race we normally don't have. So
it can play a part in the weekend at some point, can't it? And then you get that period where it subsides and you get a bout of action there. But during the race it tends to be quite straightforward. So as I say, it was touch and go at one point as to whether there was going to be any race after the red flag, to be fair, wasn't there? So we got what we could, I guess, before the light failed.
Yeah, and to be honest, it was just hit and miss in the end of the race, because as soon as the race finished, after like 10 minutes, it was dark. It was
you could tell, couldn't you? Because you could see the crowds and stuff when obviously they're doing the podiums and things and the celebrations, and you could see even my son was like, "Why is it so dark?" So it's actually quite late there. He's used to seeing Grand Prix in normal daylight, and then it's continuous daylight because it tends to match with what we have here. And then it's like he was confused as to why it was so dark there. So I'm trying to explain, but they were very close to it, weren't they? Let's face it.
It was almost like Interlagos 2008 when they had the podium at dark. Really, that one was a close one as well. So exactly. It was almost that. Not quite, but almost. So let's start at the beginning. We normally tend to bypass a little bit the practice, because these days the practice has been just a formality, basically. Teams don't run full gas on that. They turn the engines down, and the only team that seems to do a little bit of more serious running is Mercedes, and that's probably because they have problems with the car, and they might need to get some more proper data from the car, and not as much simulation and extrapolation from the data they have. But before that, talk a little bit about yourself. I almost forgot. I'm a terrible host.
No worries. No. I don't like to talk about myself too much, but it's I've always been a massive fan of motorsport. I mean, I used to go to the British Grand Prix practice days on a Friday, because I'm about 30 minutes from Silverstone. I grew up just down the road from Silverstone, so I grew up pretty much trackside at Silverstone. My dad would take me on a Friday because it was free to get in back then. And we'd go and watch the practice back in the day when F1 cars sounded like F1 cars. I'm a little bit old school in that respect. And that just kind of got me into it. And from there, I say we're quite lucky, because I'd see all kinds of prototype racing, touring cars, all sorts. So I grew up with quite a broad love of motorsport in general. But as I've got older, I've kind of drifted between F1 and endurance racing. But endurance racing is probably my passion. But I still long for the hope, the fact that potentially F1 could come back to its glory years where there's actually a bit of competition in there, it's more about the racing than the technology, hopefully. But I still keep an interest. I'm a Ferrari man at heart. I always have been. I kind of grew up in that era, I guess, when they were the cars to beat, and it's always stuck with me. So it's been interesting seeing them come back a little bit this year, but they've still got their issues. Let's face it, that's well documented.
It was a kind of, or it has been, and it's going to end like that. It was like a hit and miss season for them. They actually have. I still think that over one lap, they probably still have the best car.
Yeah, but the progress in the car has been night and day compared to where they were. They've actually got a fast car now, which is something they struggled with for a little while. It seems to be they've got a fast car, they've got some great drivers, but they're still lacking a little bit in reliability and strategy, which is key, let's face it. So, it's frustrating because they've got so many parts of the jigsaw right, but then they're still struggling in some of the fundamentals, which is a shame. But, where I live as well, I'm down the road from Williams. So I hold a bit of a soft spot for them as well. And hopefully, whenever they get anywhere near the top 10, it's like a massive celebration. So around here. So, sort of long for them to come back to their glory period as well. So, that's the thing. I've kind of grown up in an area here in the UK which is known as the Motorsport Valley, because this is where all the big motorsport teams kind of base themselves. And I grew up actually in a village where the old Silk Cut Jaguars, the Tom Walkinshaw Racing Silk Cut Jaguars were built. So I'd ride my bike down to the factory and see all these Silk Cut Jaguar panels outside as they're working on the cars. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And that kind of got me into the love of the sport. And as we've kind of mentioned before as well, I've come into sim racing backwards in that I've done a bit of circuit racing over the years, just at club level, but real life racing. And then due to the pandemic and lockdown, got into sim racing, which is how I've come across yourselves and the rest of the team. But obviously, kind of come the other way around in that respect and tried to do the transition from real life racing to sim racing, thinking it might be a bit easier, but it really isn't.
I don't have much. I have an opinion on that, but it's not founded in much reality, because the only real, let's call it, racing that I've done, it's like rental cars. So. Yeah.
That's how I started out. Basically, I didn't do the traditional route. I mean, obviously, you did the pod with Earl, who's got the most amazing background in terms of how he progressed through to motorsport, and he's driven some and racing some amazing machines across on an international scale. My experience is nothing like that, and I started out doing recreational karting with friends, and I won't stand up, but I'm 6'6" and I'm a big guy, and I shouldn't be quick in a kart, and yet I'd always be beating my friends. And convincingly so as well. So we're like, okay, maybe I know what I'm doing. But with any kind of motorsport, it comes down to funding. And I had to basically wait till I'd done all my studies and had a job. It was what we call here dad and lad racing as well. So my dad, who's always been my influence in motorsport, he and I decided to get a car, take it into a club level series and see what we can do on our budget, which was pretty minimal, to be honest. But I got to race all the best UK circuits, which to me was mind blowing. I got to race the full Silverstone GP loop in my car, which I bought pretty cheaply, and we did all right. We raced at events with big international crowds, which was pretty cool. So I had a really good experience, and then it kind of led into doing more international stuff, endurance stuff with the Creventic series in Dubai and Barcelona, which was pretty cool as well. So I've been very fortunate. What's that?
Podcast incoming.
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk more about that another time. But that's my background, basically. We enjoy the world of sim racing now as well. So that scratches that proverbial itch for now.
So basically, we switched from a guy that lives glued to the Mercedes factory to one glued to the Williams factory.
Yeah, he's definitely got a better location in that respect, but in terms of how they're doing at the moment. But yeah, that's exactly the area we live in. Earl's the other side of Silverstone to me, and he's got Mercedes there, and I've got Williams here. So and Alpine are just down the road as well. I've got a friend who works in the wind tunnel at Alpine, and he likes to drop little nuggets of inside information to me now and then because he knows I'm really keen on it. But yeah, it's really cool. Yeah.
Very, very, very cool. The only thing we have here is a few 4 Discords that do hill climbs.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well,
we're on a hill. I'm on a hill climb and karting village, kind of.
Nice.
It's Braga, so we have the Valpierra hill climb. It's one of the fastest ones in Europe, and it's part of the Masters. And we have Circuito Vasco Sameiro and the karting track that actually is part of the karting World Championships. And Hamilton won a race here, as a matter of fact. So yeah, we have that. We have some history in motor racing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So we have to do a lap or two on the on R Factor. The racetrack is there.
Yeah,
very cool. Yeah,
absolutely.
So you're a very welcome addition to the podcast, and I hope
we do
more episodes with you apart from the Graventic ones. So yeah, let's talk F1. So like we said, practice was basically the standard thing. We couldn't learn much about it. It's always the running order just changes from qualifying from practice qualifying. So we probably be better at starting at qualifying. And it was like a entire kind of wet weekend apart from qualifying actually.
Yeah.
And now to amaze Jay even more,
look at this.
Have some.
Love the graphics. Look at this. It certainly helps as well because I didn't catch all of quali. I have to hold my hands up. Family life got in the way, so I had to try and watch the highlights. But no, it's a good reminder.
Yeah, I to be honest, I always watch not live. I just catch it after. Technology lets us do that. So
absolutely.
We went into qualifying and it was basically all wet, and predictably it was not monsoon conditions, so everyone used the inters like it's usual this year. Last year was a little bit different, but this year the wet tires just seem to be like the old monsoon tires that you bring out like once or twice a season.
Yeah, they seem to be like things that you'd find in a museum now because they don't seem to be used at all, which is just bizarre. But it's a crazy situation with the whole wet tire situation. I've seen quite a few interesting memes on the internet about these tires and when they were last ever spotted in public. But the Inters seem to do a decent job. It always amazes me again the technology involved with F1 in terms of the tyre development as well, that an Inter could actually work in the kind of conditions we saw in the race and in those kind of pretty torrential conditions as well. It's mad. I mean, again, I'm not going to go into my racing experience, but I used to hate the wet, mainly because I never owned a set of wet tyres. I had to borrow them from people because my budget wouldn't allow me to buy them. And I'd borrow used wets, and whenever we were out and it was properly wet, obviously in the UK you're going to get a lot of wet races. I might as well have still been on like slicks or something because it felt like I was on ice the whole time. So whenever I see F1 cars still doing the speeds they're doing, even on an Inter in those kind of conditions, it's astounding to see the level of grip they still have with them.
Yeah, and in my opinion is the exact reason why we have problems nowadays. It's that because they are so effective in the rain. Because they bring out so much water that it all stands basically in the air. And when you have 20 Formula 1 cars that are capable, I don't know the statistics by heart, but it's like a completely amazing amount of bathtubs of water that they just shoot up in the sky every 100 meters or something like that.
They said during the race, didn't they, about the rooster tails were particularly insane and the level of sort of chaos it could ensue just from the sheer volume of water. And I remember on the commentary over here on Sky, they were saying they were trying to obviously fill out that period in between the red flag and the restart, and they were sort of saying, so I think they asked Jenson Button, so could you apply some kind of mud guard effect in these kind of conditions over the tyres to reduce the amount of spray coming out from the back? And you couldn't see him, but you could kind of tell Jenson Button's eyes were probably rolling a little bit, and he just sort of said, "You'll always have issues with spray." He said, "You'll always have issues." And to be honest, he made a good point as well with the development of the aero under the car and the floor development. That's made it even worse. So it's just going to be one of those factors you've got to just deal with. But yeah, it's particularly bad at the weekend, to be honest.
Yeah, because the whole thing about aerodynamics is that you want to make air move faster where you want it. So with these new floors, they move the air on, in this case, the water, because the track is filled with water. So it just rings underneath the water and shoots it up. If you see the back of a F1 car, the diffuser actually goes up at the back. Yeah. So it's exactly to make the air go up, and if there's water, they just make the water go up. The thing that I said yesterday, and I stand by it, why not just make the compounds harder so that they have to drive more carefully. They have to drive slower. The slower you go, the less water you shoot into the air. If there's aquaplaning, deal with it, basically.
There's an argument to be made there as well in terms of like common sense and the lack of it sometimes in the sport, and this constant need for speed and chaos potentially, which doesn't really lead to a great racing scenario, unfortunately. And like you say, I think there is something to be said for that in terms of, make the drivers work a bit harder in terms of using more car craft, going a bit slower, and changing the compound maybe, like you say. It'd be interesting to see if anything has been taken away from the weekend in that respect, in terms of feedback on tyres and potential developments down the road into future seasons or something like that, because it's going to keep happening.
Yeah, and the other two things that you have is that teams don't want to test. Pirelli always says teams don't want to test wet tires, so they don't have almost any data at all about those tires, because they want to test the tires that they are actually going to use 95% of the time, which are the dry tires. And the other thing is we have new tires for this season because of the rims. The rims went from 13 inches, the wheels went from 13 inches to 18. So the tire rolls are smaller and all that stuff. So the tires, even if the compounds are the same, the tires are going to react differently. And it seems that Pirelli got a little bit caught up in that, and so, but no one wanted to try the tires, so they didn't have any data. So these are the tires we have. So, but I think they have
effectively testing in a race weekend. To be honest, aren't they collecting data in a real race scenario? Which isn't ideal. You want to get that done before the season starts, so you can actually hone down the actual compound and tire structure you want to release for the season, rather than do in-season testing, which seems like what they're doing at the moment.
Yeah, actually, the thing that we have that maybe it's a little bit hopeful is that they are talking about having a mid-season tire test next year. So every team goes there and tests to a circuit. I would presume Barcelona.
I think they do that in other series as well, don't they? I mean, I know for a fact
and they used to do it in Formula 1, but they stopped because of budget.
Sense.
Yeah, but it makes sense. Yeah.
And we better not get onto the subject of budgets not quite yet either, then maybe, because that's still a hot potato.
Yeah, I even though we've had some details off, there's not much, and I think it's all conjecture. So I'm not really interested in talking about it. Yeah, they gone through but it's one of those subjects that I think we have to have a little bit more information to really talk about that. So.
We'll park that for now.
Yeah. So qualifying one, we the bottom five were basically Latifi, Stroll. That I'm not a Stroll hater by any means. I'm actually a very strong Stroll apologist, because I actually think he's not that bad of a driver that most people think. is actually miles away from Nicholas Latifi, in my opinion.
I think you're absolutely right, and I'm probably in that same category as yourself. I think he's a guy who came across. It's the thing with racing drivers. You tend to marry up the character you see in front of you on the screens when they're not in the car with their driving ability, and then make a conclusion. And he never came across as a guy who was particularly humble. And so I instantly didn't really like him, and I honestly didn't take much notice and thought I was always going to be one of those guys who's just there because he can afford the seat. Whereas actually, when you look over the course of the season, he's done all right, and he's clearly a talented guy. So, like you say, it's hard to really knock him as a driver because he is quick, and he's got something about him. But yeah, I would say I'm a big fan of him out of the car, but I can respect what he does in it.
Yeah, but actually we do get to see that because he's actually one of the guys that is most liked inside the paddock. He's friends with almost every driver, and he goes on holidays with Mick Schumacher and Ocon and all of those guys, and Ocon is completely the other end of the scale. He has basically no money, so it just shows you that we shouldn't really take what comes out and what
pays for it all. Yeah. Maybe that's why he goes, because Stroll pays for it all and takes Esteban with him on Friday.
Yeah. So I think the perception we get outside here, it's let's not kid ourselves, he's privileged. So yeah, he has a lot of money. His father has a lot of money, and he has the money to have the best coaches and all that stuff. Actually, his racing coach is Portuguese. So
just throw that in there.
Yeah. So
I didn't realize that. It's good knowledge.
Yeah. It's you actually saw him yesterday while they were on red flag, and he went into the pit garage and he was talking with a guy there, and that's Portuguese guy. He's a ex-rally driver in Portugal.
Oh, right.
Yeah, cool. And he has a academy. So, Nuno Pinto, if you're seeing, estás a ver, estás convidado. Sorry. But he's contracted with the Portuguese supplier, so he will never come here. So, yeah, and we like sim racing and he hates sim racing, so only that.
How can you hate sim racing?
I don't know. So yeah, then it was Kevin Magnussen. Another driver that apologizes is Mick Schumacher, and he seems to be very taking the piss out of Kevin, to be honest, because he's been out qualifying him pretty regularly and beating him in the races when he doesn't have problems with the car. So
it's been quite interesting, with the Haas as well, because they started the season quite brightly, but it seemed to be yo-yoing up and down a little bit in terms of when it comes to sort of outright pace in a quali situation. But like you say, it's interesting to see that dynamic, because I think everyone immediately expected K-Mag to come in and be obviously the leading driver, and he's shown it a little bit this season already. But then you look how the season's evolved, and Mick's really come into his own, which is really good to see, because I think everyone wants to root for Mick a little bit and hope that he can make this work, because everyone wants to see a Schumacher back in F1. And he comes across as a nice guy as well. So I'd like to see him continue. But so it was nice to see him out qualify. Again, I've got nothing against K-Mag at all, but it's always interesting to.
I have one thing. He beat Felix Acosta in World Series by Renault.
That's fair.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting that the guy who's being dropped is not the guy who has almost the highest salary on the grid. K-Mag is on a huge salary. It's crazy the amount of money. I think he's one of the highest paid F1 drivers right now. Yeah, I'm not saying that he earns as much as Hamilton or Vettel or something like that, but yeah, from the middle of the field, he's one of the highest paid ones.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's very interesting. And above him, we have Pierre Gasly, which actually AlphaTauri was having problems this weekend, and he had brake problems, and we had him complaining to the team that, why did you fix Yuki's car and you didn't fix mine? Yeah, we all know why they fixed Yuki's car. It's the Japanese Grand Prix, he's the home driver, and he's the driver that is staying on the team.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
But it seems that Pierre was a little bit frisky this weekend. So yeah.
Yeah. He seemed to be a little bit narky from what we could tell from the outside looking in, from quali right the way through, as obviously we saw in the race anyway. But he seemed to be a little bit on edge. Maybe, I don't know, had they announced his move?
Yeah, before. I think it was Thursday, if I'm not mistaken.
So that might have been weighing on his mind a little bit, potentially. I don't know. Now the cat's out of the bag. He might have got a lot of attention as a result. Maybe that played a part. But it's always interesting when they do
being out of the loop as well in some respects of the car and all that. So he's going away. So they are not going to give him the latest updates and give him the latest data and all that. So
take away the playbook like they do in the NFL. You know, we're not going to give away our secrets when we know you're going out the door. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, and in 16th place it was the new George Russell, Alexander Albon. It was. I actually don't have the data here, but it was really on the edge for him to go into qualifying too.
That's right. Yeah, because it's always a big deal if a Williams makes it into Q2 in qualifying, because it seems like a massive result, and to be that close, it's a bit of a shame. But he's done well, I think, in a car that's clearly struggled. He's still come out of it looking pretty good, unlike his teammate, unfortunately. But again, you never know what they're going to be able to do over the summer, but you kind of hope that Williams will kick on a little bit, hopefully.
Yeah, and actually it's one of the seats that is open. The only two seats that are open is the Latifi's one and Schumacher's one. So one of the two. So we went into qualifying two, and we have 15th place Mick Schumacher, and it's weird. It must have had something happen because his Q2 time was actually slower than his Q1 time, so something happened there and he wasn't able to just continue his pace. So, and one of the standout drivers of the season for me, say in 14th, Guan Yu Zhou, is actually brilliant from the beginning. He actually had points in Bahrain, so he's one of those. Zhou is probably the richest driver on the field because his family has I think it puts Stroll to shame, but he has been very good, but Alpha here was not that good, to be honest. So 14th place, it was about right for him. Yeah, and Valtteri was only 2/10 on him in mixed conditions, and a Finn driving in the rain. So it's about what we thought it might get to for a rookie. So above him, Yuki Tsunoda was not able to get into Q3 in his own Grand Prix, but he will have another shot next year. Now we know for a few weeks now. So and the car was not where it should be this weekend. It sounded like they had multiple car problems and reliability problems. So I think the only reason he actually went into Q2 maybe because he was trying to do a good job for his fan base in Japan, which are mad, the Japanese.
I mean, the sort of cutaways you saw on the live feed into the crowd, and particularly on Sunday morning with the horrific rain, it's amazing. And they kept sort of mentioning about how a different sort of set of fans they are. They're really hardcore over there in terms of their love of the sport, and being able to stick it out in those conditions, you've got to take your hat off to them as well. But you've got to imagine that spurs on a local driver a little bit as well in that respect, and gives you a few extra tenths here and there potentially. Yeah.
So above him, Valtteri Bottas, and but like you said, about where we expected. And then Daniel Ricciardo, that was actually bumped off by Norris, and the McLaren seemed to be a long way off the pace this weekend. They struggled a lot, and even Lando struggled a lot.
Yeah, you sometimes over the course of the season would expect one of them to fall away a little bit over a race weekend, and 9 times out of 10 it's been Danny Rick. But to see both of the McLaren struggling more recently has been a bit of an eye-opener as well. Because you kind of got to a point where I think sort of last season they were starting to find their way back into it. Obviously, the development of the car was working to some degree, and they were being more competitive, but they just seem to have really dropped off again. I'm not sure whether they've struggled again with the underfloor and the start of the season, making it work for them, and the developments on the floor or not. But it seems to have caught a few teams out, and I don't know if that's the same for them or not.
I actually don't know if Ricardo was using the new floor that they brought up to Singapore that Norris raced. I actually don't know that, but that might be it. They might have gotten the new floor and it just didn't work at Suzuka. That might be one of the reasons. So yeah, it was one of those. And as you get to know me better, you'll know that the first driver that I fully support in all the years that I've been watching Formula One is Norris. So seeing him, I've been watching Formula One. Like when I was a child, I watched it because my mother always watched motorsports and Formula One and MotoGP, probably more MotoGP. But I started watching like really closely about when it turned to the 2000s. And that was when I actually saw the races, not on the background or just watching, but watching the timing and all that stuff. And I never supported anyone. I just liked F1. I never supported. I never supported. The only guy that I kind of liked him, like the way he was Jensen, actually.
Yeah.
It was the first time when he won the championship. Was the first time that I kind of was happy for someone to win the championship. Yeah. And my list of drivers that I don't like is bigger than the ones I like.
I can understand that. Yeah.
And Norris is the first one that I really like. And actually, our friend Ivo, that we're going to talk about him in a bit, is a track marshal, and he actually watched Norris race Ginettas, if I'm not mistaken.
I was going to say, Ginetta Juniors. I was going to say, because I've followed Lando Norris through the Ginetta Junior series all the way up to F1 when he was even smaller and younger looking than he is now, which is hard to fathom. But he really lit it up there, and you kind of with guys like that on that kind of series, when they've got a slightly different name like Lando is, they stick in your mind and you remember them. And you knew he was quick because he was winning races in that formula, and he kind of worked his way through, and anything he sat in after that he tended to win, or at least be in the top 2 or 3, and you thought, okay, he's good, this guy. But his rise into being number 1 driver at McLaren in Formula 1 has been pretty meteoric. But he's so fast, and just comes across as a fun guy as well, to be honest. He just seems like a bit of a laugh. And I know sometimes you've got to be serious because it's a business at the end of the day. It's a top tier of motorsport, allegedly. So you've got to be serious, but I think he kind of came into his own a little bit again during the pandemic with all his online stuff and his sim racing and his streaming and his Twitch and that kind of stuff. And I guess people could relate to him a little bit closer there, because obviously normal guys like you and I to F1 drivers are light years away, but actually they become more relatable in that situation. And you think, actually, these guys are just normal, like, messing around on R Factor like we are, kind of thing. Okay, he's doing it in Monaco, which is a bit different, but he comes across as a decent guy.
Yeah, and he's actually dating a Portuguese, very beautiful Portuguese model, and he's not the only one. So both of the McLaren drivers are dating Portuguese, or half Portuguese, because Daniel Ricciardo is dating Gerard Berger's daughter, and his wife is Portuguese, and she was born in Portugal. So yeah. They are actually both dating Portuguese girls. So
there we go.
But I liked them before that.
There we go. That cements it now, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. But yeah, and Ivo actually says that he was marshalling one of his races, and when he came around, it was just like, who the is that guy? This just seemed like something completely different. And I actually had the same, I imagine it was like the same feeling that I had this year watching the Valpera hill climb. Because we are actually watching, there's a father and a daughter that race in hill climbing in Portugal. And the father actually bought a Norma. He's a very rich guy. And the daughter now races a AMG GT4 in hill climbs.
Nice.
Yeah, and you actually see the dad come around and it's an old guy that has money and drives, and you see her commitment coming around the corners. And I turned to my friend that I actually met on sim racing, is actually also a marshal, and I watched the hill climb like just beside the marshal post, and I was like, man, she's committed, and she is fast. And she's a little girl.
Guys,
yeah
those guys stand out a little bit, to be honest, don't they? They sort of they set themselves apart from the crowd in that respect. And just very quickly, there's the British Touring Car Championship culminated on Sunday as well, and the new champion Tom Ingram was crowned, and he raced with us at MG Live when I was racing my MG at Silverstone. He was a guest driver in one of the Class A cars, and I will always remember because he was racing Ginettas at the time, so he guested with us. And I remember coming into one of the corners of the new complex on the GP loop, and I saw him in my rearview mirrors because he was basically lapping me because I was in a different class, and within a blink of an eye, he was coming around the outside of me on a corner where you should not be going around the outside of anyone. He had that thing like it was on rails, and he straight away, like, I realise I'm massively inexperienced and you're racing a Ginetta, but still, the way he didn't even test the car for the weekend, but he drove that thing like he knew it inside out. And when they can do that, they kind of that commitment and that knowledge and that car craft just sets them apart from everyone. And we had experienced guys in our race who've been racing MGs for years, and he made them look absolute amateurs. So like you say, you can when you see them on the edge like that, you can see the commitment, and you think, these guys are a little bit different to the norm.
You actually see how the car behaves and how it goes, because on the hill climbs you actually see it, I think, a little bit more, because it's so uneven, the surface and all that, and when you have left hands and right-handers like in subsequence, and you see how you actually see the commitment of how they are placing the car and all that. And in my case, it helps that I've been sim racing for a long time, and I kind of know what the racing line is and all that stuff. And you just see the commitment on the car going and how it's planted, and it's just amazing to see. And you see it right away. You see the same car going by, driven by one and the other driver, and you see, no, this guy knows what a racing line is and what it's like to go fast, and the other doesn't.
They make it look easy as well, don't they? Like it's no big deal. You know, they make that really hard bits look so straightforward, like they've just jumped in the car and it's natural to them. They just know instinctively what to do and where to put the car and what's going to happen, how the car's going to react on certain cambers and that kind of stuff. So it's impressive to see those guys who have that natural ability. I'll hold my hands up straight away and say I don't have that natural ability, and I think you can learn it, but it takes a lot of time and money to do it, whereas some guys just have it out the box, I think.
Yeah, completely. So we get to Q3, and I'm actually going to say them all, and then I'm going to talk about one of them. So P10 Lando, P9 Vettel, P8 Russell, P7 Alonso, P6 Hamilton, P5 Ocon, P4 Perez, P3 Sainz, P2 Leclerc, and P1 Verstappen. And the one that I want to talk about is Vettel. An amazing weekend in the whole, but qualifying and getting it on 9th while his teammate was on Q3. And with that dog of a car, it looks like it's actually a decent race car, but qualifying car, it seems to be very slow. And doing P9, and he actually talked all weekend about he loves the track, and he actually said, if someone is doing like has to go to a wedding or something like that, I'll fill in next year.
Yeah, exactly. He just loves the place, doesn't he? He was quite open about that over the weekend, and it's going to be a real shame to see him finish at the end of the season, because he is such a lovable character. But yeah, made up to see him getting to the final quali session and out qualify his teammates so convincing, like you say, in a car like that. And you kind of raised questions over the course of the season as to whether he wasn't quite getting the same car that Lance was getting, because you don't want to bring it into it, but maybe because his dad might want his son to have the quicker car and be the standout number one driver. So it's kind of nice to see Sebastian out qualifying convincingly here.
I actually don't think that's actually true.
It's just me being cynical.
Yeah, I know. It's we don't know the guy, so we can always talk. But
yeah,
from what I've heard, Lawrence Stroll really believes that Lance is a amazing talent and he's a future world champion. So yeah, and it kind of shows with the way he bought the team and how he's going about it. He is hiring very experienced and very good drivers to drive alongside his son. Actually, we have to give it to Lance. He's been quite impressive to be besides a 4-time world champion and not be completely off the pace. It's actually quite impressive.
He's definitely held his own, and even in a race situation, he's up against very experienced world champions a lot of the time, and certainly holding his own and not seemingly inexperienced. And he's not really, he's been in the sport long enough, but actually to a degree where there are clearly guys who have won world championships, and he's really mixing it with them. So he's like we said, he's clearly talented. He's got a pedigree about him, he's clearly a good driver.
Yeah, clearly. So yeah, that was my standout driver of qualifying. Max got P1, but we kind of not expected, because the Ferraris were actually pretty quick, but Perez did a 29.7 and Verstappen did a 29.3. So yeah, Verstappen is a whole different league. Different league. So
it's a bit mad, isn't
it? The only other thing that we should probably talk about qualifying was the incident between Lando and Max. It was actually got Max a reprimand. Max decided to warm up his tires and actually do a half spin just after the quickest corner of the circuit. So
I think I just got in and put the telly on to see that literally as it was happening, and I had to kind of almost go, what's just happened, because I could see Norris was slowing down clearly, like you do. You want to get a good run out to begin your flying lap, but we could see, obviously, he was being held up a little bit by Verstappen, and thought, okay, Verstappen's just going to let him pass around the corner, which seemed fine. Then Norris obviously went for it, but then I couldn't believe what I saw, because initially your first reaction was, well, it's like Verstappen's just turned into him. What's he doing? And then you look at what he was doing in the replays and warming his tyres up, but the whole car moved like that, to the point where, fair play to Lando to have the reactions to take it to the grass and actually keep it going at speed in the right direction. And it didn't really hinder his flying lap all that much. It must have really woke him up. But it was a tough one, because you could sort of say that I know a lot of the commentators on Sky were saying that Lando knew he was there, he's got to take care, but at the same time, from the other side, Max knew that Lando was about to start a flying lap. He was going to come by him at some point over that section of track, and to warm his tyres up is one thing, but to move the direction of the car where it's blocking an element of the circuit, so he has to take evasive action, is a little bit naughty, I thought. it's one of those things, but a bit scary.
Yeah, and actually in the regulations, it says that you can't warm up your tires in the racing line. So you have to go away from the racing line and then do the burnouts. So it was actually bang on in the middle of the track at the fastest corner of after the fastest corner of the circuit, that it's blind. You cannot see when you enter the corner, you cannot see the exit of the corner because there's a wall on the inside. So that's
what made it even worse. The fact that when you see it from Lando's eye view, when he comes around the corner and just sees the car slowly doing that in front of him, you think, wow, that's, like you say, it's such a fast corner. To do it there was a little bit naughty.
So we have Max in pole, Charles second, and Carlos in third. And I'm going to complain again about your favorite team because they have two drivers with the same first name, just in different languages. So screw them. I always have to
perfectly fair.
I always have to think a little bit. So next, I normally have 4 pages of notes. I take notes during the race. I'm actually the only one on the podcast.
Professional.
This time,
just one. I was going to say, just written on the back of a cigarette packet this time because there was very little to. I say that from a Grand Prix perspective, there was much less to really write notes about, I guess. But it certainly, we kind of discussed a little bit earlier. It certainly made for a less predictable weekend. We know obviously the result at the end of the day, but how it got there was more interesting than I found from some of the previous races, purely due to the weather and the chaos that ensues when weather like that hits and the time that it did hit, and how teams then react to it, and the FIA react to it obviously as well. It was, as I mentioned, it was due to start around here in the UK when we, as a house, get up, and we came down with my little boy and thought we'll put it on, catch the opening lap. And I was like, oh, okay. I had to explain to him that, no, we're not going to catch the opening lap yet. And we don't know when we're going to catch the opening lap, but look at the rain, that's crazy. And then the commentator was sort of saying there may not even be a Grand Prix at one point because they were saying the clouds forecast and the rain forecast was due to be pretty substantial for a long period of time, and they're against the light falling away as well. So would there be enough daylight to even finish any kind of Grand Prix? So it was all a little bit up in the air, and led to some quite interesting filling by the commentators and broadcast channels. But ultimately, it was quite nice to actually get that insight from the guys, knowing they are having to pad it out a little bit whilst, the race control trying to work out whether they could go back out or not. It was certainly a very interesting morning. Not as many notes, but it was quite eventful still.
Yeah, so we actually had a standing start in the rain. The entire grid was with Inters. As we discussed, it's almost if there's not the amount of water that's standing water, really, they all go into the Inters. And let's be honest, we're with the current tires, I don't really think we're ever going to get a standing start with wet tires, to be honest, because they're going to start on, even if it starts on a safety car start, so almost like a rolling start. So actually in the start we had 2 drivers that had a amazing start, and they were the 2 Astons. They actually had an amazing start. Stroll, after the first lap, had gained 7 places. It's
impressive. Yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, and if you actually see his racecraft on the first corners, it's amazing. He looked like a world champion, to be honest. He just went where no one wanted to go, and he found a grip. There was grip, like really on the inside when no one wanted to go. You can talk about this a little bit more than me, but in the rain, you don't really want to go completely on the racing line because there's a lot of rubber and it gets a lot greasy, and you actually
Yeah, this is one of the things that kind of goes against all your natural instinct, which I've found quite a steep learning curve when I first started racing, because again, my circuit racing was a baptism of fire pretty much, because I hadn't really had the budget to go testing a great deal of time. So we did go to a circuit where it was very wet, and like I say, I didn't have my own wet tyres, so I'd have to borrow scrubbed wet tyres from other people. You're trying to deal with a lot of factors when you're out on the circuit, obviously, in terms of just trying to race competitively, but then you're also trying to factor in where is standing water, where is there a line drying at all. But then, like you say, you've got to then go against all your natural instinct to still go follow the racing line, because actually that's sometimes the more treacherous line. Sort of the basics about staying off the curbs you kind of know anyway instinctively, but then to try and find a different line, but then everyone else is trying to do the same thing as well, it leads to quite a melee at times. But like I say, it's one of those things you have to learn quite quickly, and it's not instinctive. Whereas actually, obviously, these guys have been racing for a considerable amount of time and in wet conditions a lot more than I had done. But he certainly seemed to find his way through with great confidence, which was pretty impressive to see. So he had a rocket start, really.
Yeah. And Vettel was the other one, but it was actually on the other side of the track.
Yeah.
And his onboard is crazy for a whole nother reason, because when he got into actually the T1, but in a Formula One car is not really a corner. The T1 at Suzuka, it's just let's say a braking marker, and you brake for T2. And when he went to do the corner, you couldn't see anything. Anything with the spray, you couldn't see nothing.
It's nuts. It's the sort of thing you're used to seeing at Spa in some of these crazy sort of highlight reels where they try and demonstrate the sheer lunacy of what these guys have to race in at sometimes. I remember seeing a very memorable clip of Dino Zamparelli in a F3, I think, at Spa one. So if you YouTube, it's one of the biggest saves ever witnessed, because the spray is unreal, and he comes across at the top of Eau Rouge, a car parked, or a couple of cars have obviously had an incident, and with the slightest flick, he just manages to take to the grass and somehow keep it facing the right direction and get back on circuit. And it's that kind of situation where you see similar effects as we did going into that corner at the weekend as well. We just think, are these guys just purely driving on instinct? I mean, obviously they'll have their own markers and things, but even then they're heavily reduced. So it's incredible to see.
Yeah, Ocon actually made a comment that he parts of the race he was driving just with the LEDs, the LEDs on the car in front and the white lines. Yeah. You couldn't see anything else.
Crazy. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's just madness.
It's mad to having being on public roads in those kind of situations and thinking, okay, I'm on a public road, I'll just reduce my speed and I'll be fine. Whereas these guys can't really do it that much. They have to still keep it pretty nailed and just hope beyond hope that actually nothing is going to kick off up front, and if I just follow these lights and these lines, then hopefully it will ease off, and we'll start to have less spray and a dry line, and the sun might come out at some point. You just hope that happens, I guess. But it's mad to think the speeds they still do, and driving with that to contend with it's pretty mad.
Yeah.
Full respect to them.
So Vettel actually touched Alonso and spun on T1, and the other guy that had, but it was on the other spectrum, Verstappen had another time a horrendous start, but he was actually able to go on the outside into T1 and T2 and hang it around the outside and pass Leclerc again, because I actually think Leclerc went in front of him a little bit, and Max just complete confidence in his abilities and in his car, and just went on and was able to keep first place. Amazing driving. It's like a cheat code, really, isn't it? It's one of those things to have confidence in the car, but in those conditions as well to have confidence in the car, because rain like that can be a real leveler. But no, it didn't seem to affect him at all. He's just like, no, I know this car is
absolutely nailed to this track regardless. So I'm just going to hang around the outside and I'll be fine. But like you say, it's interesting to see the start he did get because he's rapid, there's no denying, but his starts have been left wanting a little bit recently. It doesn't seem to make any impact at the end of the day in terms of the result, but I guess he's got that luxury he can afford. But yeah, I guess he's a world champion, obviously, back to back. But one thing he probably wants to work on is his starts. These guys are perfectionists, let's face it. So I'm sure he'll be kicking him, and he'll go back and review it and go, yeah, that was crap. I could have done so much better off the line. So
yeah, so that was T1. Then nothing really happened. Everyone was everyone one in front of the other. And then when we got to the right-handers complex after the hairpin, Sainz actually got huge aquaplaning and then had a huge accident. And yeah, the car was parked half in the middle of the track. So
yeah. That was sad to see as a Ferrari fan, especially my little boy is a massive Red Bull fan, so he takes great delight whenever there's a Ferrari off track in any guise. So he was quite happy to see that, whereas I was a bit gutted, to be honest, because you sometimes feel like, okay, Verstappen's going to take some stopping regardless of where you are, what conditions. So you always kind of want at least two cars to try and take a fight to him. So to lose one of those so early on is a bit demoralising. You kind of think, okay, you're asking a lot of Leclerc then to try and take a fight to Verstappen, especially with Perez directly behind as well. He's got his rear gunner there to help him out if need be. So yeah, it was a shame really. But like you say, he was a passenger at the end of the day in that scenario.
Yeah. So we actually got a safety car out of that. Sainz was out. Albon was out too, and at first I thought it was just an engine problem, but apparently he collected some debris from Carlos. So
Carlos, yeah, it's the
Ferrari.
Yeah.
Fuck. And I think he punctured a radiator or something like that, and he would just parked it because there was nothing to do. Guan Yu actually had a spin on the hairpin, but was able to keep going with no problem. And Gasly collected a huge, it was on one of those sponsorship cards, those ones that they have on the side, and was basically not able to see where he was going until the pits. So yeah, the first
a mobile billboard at one point, really, wasn't it?
Basically, yeah, the world's fastest billboard.
Yeah, exactly.
He actually went to the pits to change his front wing and put on wet tires, and came off. And now I'm just going to say how it happened. So he was the only one who pitted in the end of the lap. We were under safety car. He went, and then we got a red flag, and all the cars parked. So this was what I saw, basically. Mm-hmm. This is what I saw. After we had the red flag, we heard some colorful radio messages from Gasly.
Yeah.
And he was raging with everyone on his pit wall, and then we saw the images of him just going so close to the tractor that was retrieving the Carlos car.
Yeah.
So, do you want to give your opinion before I talk about people's opinion?
I was going to say, I'm really keen to hear that, because we spoke about it a bit earlier, and I kind of take the side of initially when it happened. Obviously, the first thing I saw of it as well was on social media, and then suddenly you've got all these images and people raging about it on social media, referencing the whole Jules Bianchi incident as well, and going, how's the sport allowed this to happen? So I thought, okay, we need to dissect it. And the good thing was, with the pause in the race, it gave the pundits or the broadcast team the chance to really pull it apart and see not only what happened, how it happened, but also what could have been done potentially from both sides to try and prevent it. So initially, it was amazement really that it was a live recovery truck on what was technically still a live circuit, because Gasly was still yet to pass it. And you're just thinking, wow, because we talked about the visibility issue, and like you said, the driver's driving purely off the rain lights of the car in front and the white lines at the side of the circuit. I know there wasn't a huge amount of spray, but the visibility was insanely poor, and the speed he was doing, it was fast. It was excessive potentially, like you say, under the flag situation. It was too fast, but I can kind of see both sides to some extent. And also I think Johnny Herbert actually made a good point on the Sky broadcast by saying it could have all been avoided through communication. You know, the FIA, the race director, has live communication with the pit wall, with the garages, who have live communication with the driver. It only takes a quick message saying, you know, there's a live recovery vehicle on this section of the circuit, reduce your speed, be aware, that kind of thing. Who knows if that actually happened? I don't know if it did, but judging by the speed he was going, it maybe didn't. And that could have potentially played a part in it and hopefully sorted that bit out. But it's hard because there's lots of things you can do in terms of visibility of the recovery trucks in that kind of situation, in terms of having better visibility in those situations. They were saying that the lights on the back of the tractor were so dim, no one was going to see that. And someone suggested, what if that was actually a marshal on the track as well? No one would have seen a marshal on the track either. So it is extremely dangerous. And I can see from a safety perspective why people are saying that Gasly shouldn't have been going that fast at all. But similarly, all they had to do was let Gasly go and then get the recovery truck on the circuit and then recover the car. So it seemed like it was all a bit of a farce in a way. It could have easily been avoided. We're lucky that nothing bad happened, but the potential was still there for something really bad to happen. So yeah, I can kind of see both sides, and they've just got to learn from that. We kind of had that incident with the Jules thing, but yeah, hopefully it won't happen again and they'll learn from this.
Yeah, actually, we now have a live change of plans. So right now, I'm not going to say...
You got Pierre Gasly on the phone.
Yeah, I just called Pierre Gasly, and I have him on the phone. So welcome, Pierre. Welcome to the podcast.
Please don't call me that. I'm not Gasly. I don't want to see Gasly in front of me in the next few days.
So for everyone listening and everyone seeing, because I don't have the graphic, we actually had an impromptu appearance of Ivo in the podcast, and he will explain in proper English. Let's hope. So Ivo is actually the track marshal we were talking about. He actually participated in yesterday's Portuguese podcast. But yeah, he's here to give his opinion on the incident. Jay was very politically correct about it. He has a little bit of a different view. So welcome, Ivo. Welcome to your first English podcast. Welcome. So what was your view of the incident?
Right. First of all, thank you very much. Well, like I said yesterday, I've been in situations similar to that one. Maybe not on those conditions with the track like that, with the rain, but I've been in conditions where the safety car is passing by us, bringing all the drivers behind him, and normally you do have 3, 4, or 1, depends, drivers getting behind because they have to pit or because they actually spun somewhere on the track. That's why the safety car came on track, and for some reason they were able to get on track on their own, and we call it a back marker, not back markers, but drivers that stay behind and then they try to catch up the pace of the safety car. That's what happened with Gasly. He pit and he was trying to catch up. I think there's two situations. One, I think the team did not inform Gasly properly. And the second one, Gasly was more focused in getting the pack than actually paying attention what was going on track. And then he used an excuse. We all know what happened to Jules Bianchi. It was a completely different situation. Okay, on the time of his accident, there was no safety car on track. It's a completely different situation. It did happen. It shouldn't happen. And Gasly was very close to Jules Bianchi. We all know that. And maybe he did use that, I wouldn't say frustration, but part of that hanger on that time. But Gasly was on turn 11. Sainz was, and the crane was on turn 12, and the pack was doing the turn 13. Gasly is informed by his engineer that the pack is on turn 13, so he's on turn 11, and he decided to speed up to catch up the pack. He knew Sainz was there, right? Because if you all see the images, when he took the billboard with him, he drove past by Sainz, so he knew that Sainz was there. He didn't knew that the crane was on track. He didn't knew the marshals were not on track, right? But that's the job of his engineer. He should have told him, bear in mind, turn 12, there's work on track. So I think that's a fail from his team if they didn't told him. If they did, and that's even worse because he's driving 200 kilometers an hour on a zone where people are working. The second situation is, it's like I said yesterday, take the crane out. Just remove the crane. Put this scenario, remove the crane, leave the marshals and the car. No one would said anything. There was just marshals. And that's my anger comes from there. Yes, there was a crane. I'm not saying that there's no blame on it. Okay. It's like I explained yesterday. In Europe, we do use the JCBs, which they're very good to operate, and that crane is not actually suitable for that kind of work. We all know that. That's a tractor with a hook on the front. To hook the car, it needs to be very close to the car. A JCB, all he needs is a telehandler. It can be outside of the track, and with the arm, he can pull the car into the gravel and then drag the car safely close to the barriers. So that's one point that probably missed on the Japan Grand Prix. Maybe they're not using the right equipment, but that's another conversation. That's another situation, and unfortunately, it's not up to the race director to decide what kind of machines they use. What annoys me is that everyone is very quickly pointing the finger to the race director, the decision, but like Jay was saying. It happens so quick, these kind of decisions. Yeah, put it this way: if the marshal didn't went on track, and if the crane didn't went on track, you know what most of the drivers would say? Why are they taking so long to take Carlos Sainz from there?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because it did happen. It did happen on other tracks. Why are they taking so long? Why? Take the safety car. They had plenty of time to remove the car. And what annoys me is everyone is surprised because there's a crane in there. Okay, just remove the crane, but leave the marshals there. I bet any money on it, no one would say anything. But what if Gasly loses control at 200 kilometers an hour and hits Sainz's car with marshals behind it? He would kill someone.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that's what people don't actually talk about. Every time we go on track, we are risking our lives to try to keep the race going, you know? And unfortunately, people tend to forget. I'm not trying to blame anyone, okay? I like Gasly anyway. I'm just joking, you know? But people forget that first of all, we are volunteers. Second, we are there for the driver's safety and to keep the race going in a safer way. But to do that, we need to be safe as well. And there's a video of a spectator filming from the beginning of the crash till Gasly drives past. And if you notice, we have a rule. If the pack is coming with a safety car, we can't do anything. We need to stay still and protect ourselves behind something. In this case, behind a crane, behind the car. But if they are behind the car, they need to keep the pace low. And yesterday, I forgot to mention one thing. I don't know if they were doing that on post, but even with the safety car on track, there's the luminescent sign, the signs, the lights, which is a yellow and SC, meaning safety car. On the post, on the marshal's post, there's a yellow flag and a placard saying SC as well. But if there's marshals on track, there is the flag marshal. He's waving 2 yellows. So that means double danger. And I bet any money that flag was there. Gasly, he just ignored it. Because he was more worried to catch the pack. And I totally understand that. But the problem is when they try to blame on those images that you're actually displaying now, look at the speed that he goes past by that marshal. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I mean, he's more worried about the crane than actually the human lives that were on track. He's human as well. If he crashed against a crane, yes, he would probably not survive. But let's not forget that, he should have gone slower. That's my opinion. I think there's not more to
I think you're right. I think there's a level of youthful exuberance in there as well. Like you said, he was eager to catch up the pack, and maybe that was what clouded his judgment a bit as well. And I think Paul di Resta made an interesting point as well, is that they don't use the same method that other high-level series use in terms of the slow zones. And could they have, in fact, just neutralised this section of the circuit with a slow zone to enforce that he had to be under, what was it?
Absolutely.
However many kph is in Formula One, but that could have been an easy way of implementing and forcing him to slow down. Never mind catching up the pack or being able to see a flag waving. Just neutralise that section of the circuit. He has to instantly drop down to whatever kph is set, and it's safer for everyone involved. That's what they do at Le Mans. That's what they do at other high-level series as well.
Yeah, the only thing is, as you talked about yesterday, Ivo, the drivers, when there's a safety car and double wave yellows, they have to be always ready to stop. And at the pace that Gasly was going, he was not going to stop.
No. If it had tried, then it could have ended up even worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and actually, I'm showing the second video. I'm sorry for our listeners, but you can go onto YouTube and I'll show the pace that Gasly passes is clearly much, much faster than the rest of the pack.
But again, we can't, and Jay as a driver, he probably agrees with me. We can't totally blame Gasly because it's a team. He should be informed. Bear in mind, you are reaching turn 11. There's people on track on turn 12. The pack is on turn 13. So just drive past slowly. They probably didn't. What they did was they just inform him the pack is on turn 13.
Yeah. And like you said, they have such a high level and volume of communication with the drivers these days for everything. Absolutely, we only get to see a small glimpse of it on the actual broadcast. Whereas actually, it could have been so easily avoided to do that. When I was racing, we didn't have any pit-to-car radio in my series, so you have to look out for marshals. You have to really think about safety and then reduce it even more in terms of your speed and heighten your awareness even more, because you're literally just going over whatever you can see in front of you. You don't have that friendly voice in your ear guiding you. Admittedly, we're doing very different speeds.
But you know what, Jay? You mentioned something curious. Yesterday, I was joking with Pedro that I love to see club racing. I'm a marshal in Brands Hatch. It's my main circuit. I do Silverstone as well.
Fantastic.
But
thank you.
But the club racing, I like it. I have two distant opinions of club racing. First, I call all of you guys that do club racing mental, because you just flat out, and like you said, most of you, it's the budget is very low, so all you want to do is just race, and you want to enjoy the maximum that you can on track. If they give you 50 minutes and you can stay 52, you will stay 52 minutes on track, just to have the pleasure to keep going. Yeah. But at the same time, I have to admit, I met and I've seen a lot of club racing in Brands Hatch, and yes, you have people that they're just there, and the adrenaline takes over of them, and they don't look at anything. But when it comes to respect the marshals, and I noticed this not just in club racing, but in England in motorsports, there's quite of a big respect for marshals. And look, I've done loads of races for British touring car, and I mean, those guys on track, they're like lions. They will kill themselves, bumper to bumper, mirror. They don't care. But when it comes to marshals, they will slow down. They will respect everything. I mean, they are very... And the first British touring car race that I've done, I was scared. The amount of speed they put on those cars, and it's like you were saying about Tom Ingram. I'm a big fan of Tom, and it's just amazing the things they can do on those cars, the limits they can take. But at the same time, look, something that I've never seen in my country. I come from Estoril. I grew up on the Portuguese racing track Estoril, and when I come to Brands Hatch, I think it was the JCW races, the minis, and I seen a marshal on my post pointing to the driver because he spun on the gravel trap, and the marshal was telling him to go on the grass, and he went to clear the tires before he go on track. And I was saying, what? Yeah. In Portugal, if I'll tell that to a driver, he will tell me, I'm not going to say the word, but
hold up. Yeah,
he wouldn't go. He wouldn't go. And in here, they are so respectful. When it comes to marshal, it's unbelievable.
I mean, I'll be honest, I hold my hands up. I was very inexperienced when I started. I had the odd off-track excursion, and sometimes I would come across a marshal, and I'd respect them so much. They're almost like the law, in this country you grow up respecting police officers, that kind of thing. I'm not saying they're the same, but you respect the fact that they are the authority immediately up close and personal to us. Whatever they say goes, and it's instilled very early on in your racing journey, if you like, that when you get your license, you are kind of, it's drummed into you that you respect the marshals, and that continues as you go through your early racing life as well. Whenever you go to your first few meetings, it's always a case of in the driver's briefing, by and large, there's a marshal there as well to be part of that. But I was never a race winner in my club racing. I was always, top 10 in class, largely near the back due to the class I was in. But no matter where I was, and no matter how bad my race was, when it came down to the cooling down lap after the checkered flag had dropped, I'd make a proper point of actually acknowledging everyone on every marshal point that was there, especially like if the weather was horrible as well, because you respect the fact that they're giving up their time. Sorry, I was talking about you're not one of them. We respect the fact you're giving up your time to be there so we can do what we do. Even if we've had a really shocking race, the fact that we're able to go out and do it, which not many people are able to do, even on a limited budget, it's quite a privilege to be able to do it. But you always make a point of acknowledging every marshal post, regardless of how bad your day's been, because it's just something that's kind of ingrained in you from when you start that motorsport journey through from track days, taking your test to get your license, and then going from your very first race meeting onwards, because you by and large we all watch it, we know how dangerous the sport is, and without marshals there who know what they're doing, it can really go badly wrong very quickly. I had an incident at Snetterton one year where I had to pull off because my engine went on the main straight, and I pulled over. I didn't even realise, but someone showed me afterwards the photos of my car on fire underneath where the engine had let go, and marshals were there within seconds with a fire extinguisher to put that out. And I was like, I was pretty grateful because it saved my car. Ultimately, I put a lot of money into that car to buy it. Go out and reshell, buy a new car would have been my season over, whereas actually it was quite limited in terms of the damage done, because they put the fire out quite quickly, and we could actually just fix that and finish the season. So it was actually thanks to the response time of that Marshall that I could actually continue racing.
Yeah, one example that things can go wrong so quickly. I mean, and in Brands Hatch, it's a fine example on that, on the paddock hill bit. Have you seen the crash this weekend of the Porsche 911?
In the trees, that was crazy.
No, that's on the top of the marshal's hut.
Yeah,
there was 2 marshals under the car, crawling out of the. It's just amazing how things can go wrong so quickly. I mean, it was a normal spun. It just came, it hit the barriers, and suddenly the car is in the air. It's just, I mean, I learned in motor racing. I mean, it doesn't matter where the car goes. You just have to expect the worst, because we never know where it's going to end. And,
so I completely. That's why I kind of sat on the fence for the Gasly incident, because from a driver's perspective, you kind of think, okay, maybe has his team let him down, not making him as aware as he should be that what's unfolding in front of him, or what's on the circuit. And at the same time, like we said, all the focus was on the tractor, on the coverage. The tractor's there, you can't see the tractor. And then someone, I think it might have been Paul di Resta or Johnny Herbert again, said, but what if that was a Marshall? No one would be able to pick out a Marshall in that visibility. Even if they had a fluorescent tabard on an orange suit, you're not going to see them in time to be able to react to that speed. And that's what. No, exactly. So, it was a real eye-opener, I think, for everyone involved in Formula One, hopefully. And I don't know what the outcome has been of it. I've not read much after it, because obviously I think all the attention's been on Max winning the championship, so that kind of glossed over everything that kind of happened. So we've gone from Max winning the world championship to the whole budget cap breach, and suddenly the whole tractor on the circuit incident's kind of just been buried, which is a bit concerning, I think.
The only thing that got out was a penalty, but it was not for the speed that he was doing when he was passing the scene. It was on the 130R corner that he was doing 250 kilometers per hour under a red flag.
On that note, I don't agree with that. See, that's the thing. I think FIA should use not the red flag to penalize Gasly. I mean, they can use the whole lot. I mean, they don't even need to use the red flag. They just can say, look, there was marshals on track. You should be informed by your team. That's it. You were exceeding the speed. The problem is FIA doesn't have actually a regulation that says, oh, you need to be under this certain amount of speed to catch up the safety car. On the other end, sometimes they actually incentivize the drivers to go faster to catch up the pack. I mean, yes, if the track is clear, it makes sense. That was not the case.
No, but you've got to take the conditions into account in that situation, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. But again, we could be here hours and hours talking about this.
Let's not do that, because yesterday we had 2.5 hours of podcast, and we cannot do that today, and we are already 1.5 hours. So yeah,
I gave my opinion. Thank you, Pedro, for letting me come on the last time. Jay, was a pleasure to meet you. I hope I speak with you really soon. As you know, I live in England, so I'll probably be in Silverstone soon.
Fantastic.
But we will catch up.
Definitely. We'll be in touch.
I guess.
Yeah, sounds great.
Right, guys. I'm just gonna keep listening to you. Yeah, and I'll shut up now.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Yeah, have a good one. See ya. So yeah, guys, that was Ivo. He gave his take on what happened. The only thing that I'm going to say, because I'm not as experienced as you guys are in these matters, but I think it's clear that we probably have to maybe look at these incidents a little bit differently. I think, like Ivo said, Gasly shouldn't have been doing that speed and all that stuff, and shouldn't have done the scene that he did when he got out of the car. I think the team should have just rallied around him and calm him down and say, we made a mistake, we didn't say it to you. The marshals followed procedures. The normal procedure is if actually the safety car exists for marshals to go on track and vehicles to go on track. If there wasn't nothing of that, it would be in a virtual safety car and not a full-on safety car. So drivers should expect marshals and vehicles on track if there's a safety car. It happened at Monza with Ricciardo's car. No one complained about the tractor in the track. I'm going to, I normally don't do this, but I'm going to reference a comment on YouTube. Carl News, our good friend, has been talking about the Delta. Yeah, it was the Delta is in place, and it's in place for safety cars and for virtual safety cars. But even if you have 9 seconds, like he had a negative 9 seconds, so he could go 9 seconds faster on track. While passing a scene of a crash, you should not care about that. Let's be honest, we were not going to end the safety car. Like, we even got a red flag before Gasly got to the scene of the race. So we probably just have to take this all into account, and they have to review procedures in wet races, probably. That's basically it. I think that's
it in a nutshell.
You can talk about that. Yeah, that's basically it. And like I said yesterday, I don't think that this situation of 2 race directors in F1 is working all that well, because we need a regular race director so that they can enforce their way of working, and they can basically mold the race direction of the championship in their own way, like Eduardo did on the WEC. He's a very experienced race director. I think no one can take that away from him. And maybe they if it's him, if it's another one, we should look at that. Probably we know via the FIA we have no power over anyone. But they probably should take a look at that. And probably because either of those guys is able to do a good job, so they just need a regular guy, so that a person that knows everyone, like Charlie did. Let's be honest. Charlie was able to do the job of 3 or 4 people because he was the one who invented all of those regulations and did all of the work. So no one knew what he did. He was even able to do the job of probably 10 people because he was so it was all of his rules. So and that's actually my hot take for last year. I actually think that Messi, while he did make a mistake, I do think that this age of Drive to Survive and we having team principals being able to click on the button and talk to the race director, I think that's mad, to be honest.
It was crazy.
Madness. That's madness, and I think all of that drove everything to the conclusion that we had last year. Let's be honest.
No, absolutely right. Yeah, I think it just showed it became way too Netflixed to coin a term, because of the fact that I remember seeing, I think it was at the British Grand Prix last year, where you had Horner and Wolff both having both getting on to go on to race control, arguing like they were in school, and it's just embarrassing to some extent. It's like they're trying to turn it into some kind of fake courtroom scenario with 2 sides battling it over and a judge in the corner. It's like, this is Formula One. This never used to happen. This was never part of the sport. Why is it allowed to? It just became a bit of a circus, and that's, like you say, it's come off the back of the Drive to Survive culture that's kind of been in play as well. And it doesn't need to be an F1. Like you say, you need a single point of authority, with which Eduardo Freitas clearly is, because the work and experience he has in WEC is top draw. He's someone who won't suffer fools gladly. He came in and he put his authority into the sport, and it's been working. It's what was needed after the situation we had previously. But yeah, it needs to get back into that kind of scenario where there's one voice of authority, and it's like the whole lack of respect with referees in football and that kind of thing. It's going down that route, which you just don't want. It can't really be a thing. But again, it's all about money and the audiences, the global audience, the impact that the Drive to Survive series has had in terms of the global series. Is clearly where the owners of F1 see things going to some extent, but you hope that they'll learn from some of the feedback, and some of the feedback recently has been pretty negative in terms of the impact, not only on the sport from a fan's point of view, but also within the sport from the teams. I think there was an issue with the last series where there was a lot of clever editing to create this potential feud between Lando Norris and Danny Rick. And they came out quite openly saying
worse than that.
Yeah, it was really
past years between Lando and Carlos. So we all watched the entire season, and they are still very good friends. They are basically slapping each other in the balls in the media pen, and I'm not joking.
No,
and they actually did an episode that was all about the bitter rivalry between Carlos and Landon, and I think every F1 fan that just watches the championship was like, what?
Yeah, exactly. And they even came out sort of saying the bits of audio they used from the pit to car radio had been lifted from different races and kind of edited together to create this. It's like, that's not right. Don't turn it into a pantomime because it's going to lose credibility. It's bad enough that they've got this calendar where they're going to some crazy venues now out in the States as well, and it's all about the money, the financial side of it, and the city races. Hopefully not going anywhere near down the Formula E kind of thing, and keeping some historic tracks at least. But you just hope that some common sense will prevail and rein them in a little bit in terms of what the direction they're taking stuff like that in, because it could ultimately see the credibility lost from the sport if it continues down that route, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it shows on social media, and I'm not gatekeeping here. I welcome everyone. I really do. I'm fine with talking with people that don't really know the sport all that well, and giving them a few pointers and all that. But I just don't like the way that social media is going on now, and all the hype around certain things that have nothing to do with motorsports. And you see some comments on the internet, and it's crazy, and it gains traction because we have so many new fans, and it's good, but many of them come into the sport with a clouded vision of what is the sport. And it's a bit sad because they could be having a lot more fun watching it if they understood a little bit the sport. And unfortunately, the more level-headed comments are not as enticing on the internet, so they get just lost in the middle of it all. And
that's unfortunately the world of social media. You see it in other sports as well. It's that kind of sort of clickbait controversy that grabs headlines and creates more of a whirlwind kind of around any kind of potential story, not even an actual story. It doesn't take much for that then to get whipped up into really bad sort of social media. I'm trying to find the right word for it, but it drags the sport down a little, and it's not just F1, but F1's heading that direction, which is really quite worrying. I think, like you say, it's that culture that's come out of it, when actually it doesn't need to be taken down that route. I get the whole interest from Drive to Survive and bringing people into the sport who previously maybe haven't had an interest. My wife, for example, never really had a massive interest in F1. Got really into Drive to Survive. It was really engaging, and I was like, it's great. She gets, it's all the cars, all the drivers, all the teams, and it's quite comical hearing Gunther Steiner swear a lot. Let's be honest, it's quite interesting and funny. But at the same time, there is a wider audience who've coming off the back of that series who now want to just create rivalries, and not just fun, playful bit of banter rivalries. It gets quite heated. The whole Hamilton versus Verstappen thing has just escalated massively over the years beyond control, and some of the things that you read are really quite toxic. You think, this is F1, it shouldn't be like this.
I usually say this, leave those comments to football that has been doing that for ages. Soccer, sorry for those of you who are outside of the civilized Europe football scene. I actually don't care because I don't like it, but just a little bit of fun. And that's exactly what we had after this, because we actually had a lot of time under red flag because it continued raining all of the time and the track became basically undrivable. And we actually were not sure, like you said, if we were going to have a race or not, and it was all like in a bit of a mess in that part. And then from nothing, we actually had a race. And for those of you that don't know, we have two timelines in a race. From the start of the clock, let's say it's 1 o'clock that starts. So if the race is supposed to start at 1, you have 3 hours for the event to take place. And once the race starts, you have 2 hours to finish the race. So because we started the race and we actually did half a lap of racing, but then more a lap and a half of safety car, we had a race started. So we had 2 hours to finish the race, and we got underway actually at 40 minutes to the end. And like Singapore, even the graphic on the screen changed from the number of laps. And I hate this because it messes my notes. I always have the lap that it happens, and now I have sometimes the time, but I don't know how many laps have passed between them. So please, Formula One, put what lap they are in at least. It's just 2 numbers.
Yeah,
please do that. For my notes' sake.
Exactly.
So we restarted behind the safety car. So if you are unsure why every driver started on the wet tire, those of you listening, it's a regulation. If you start under the safety car, restart under the safety car, and there's a wet track, and the race was actually decided to be a wet race, it's mandatory to start on the rain tire. So they started, and immediately after 1 lap, Vettel and Latifi came into the pits to put in inters. It was actually I guess if it was free, most of them would have chosen the inters anyway. So yeah, and it was a little bit because Vettel actually had a bit of a wiggle there in the pit lane, and so I actually have on my notes unsafe release, but then it was nothing. It actually happened after that with Lance Stroll, so it seemed, it seemed that the Astons were not able to get off the pit box that well. 1 lap later, Norris and Bottas came in to put inters. At this time, the visibility was shocking. It was so much spray because we had much more water in the circuit, and it all comes up.
Yeah.
And yeah, but this actually triggered, so like everyone came into the pits because Vettel actually started immediately doing best.
It was like 5 seconds a lap quicker than someone, because I remember watching it, and I think it was George Russell doing George Russell things over the intercom, basically saying, "This is the worst decision you've ever made." Kind of thing. What are you entertaining these intermediates? And then they sort of said, Vettel's just come and changed. He's immediately like 5 seconds a lap quicker than someone. And it's like, that's why.
His problem was different. Because actually we had everyone coming into the pits, and there were two teams that double stacked,
yeah,
immediately, which were Red Bull and Mercedes. Red Bull did it perfectly. Mercedes. Like Russell was stopped for so much time that I think it would be better to just go around the circuit. Yeah, that's why I complained, actually.
Okay.
So it was basically because they were so close together. Because Verstappen was crazy. This race was crazy. So much faster than everyone else.
Yeah.
So much faster. It was really crazy. So I think he gained. I think it was like 7 seconds in 2 laps to Paris. So he had a buffer to Paris. So they were able to comfortably just get Verstappen in, and then double stacking is when both cars from the same team come into the pits, although they both have kind of different pit crews. They only have one place in the pit area to do the pit stops, so they have to do it in the same place. So if Verstappen is there, Paris cannot be there at the same time. This is not F1 2022 or whatever the hell it's now, where it's ghosting. So yeah, and actually the only drivers that after that round of pit stops that didn't pit were Alonso, Ricciardo, and Mick Schumacher. Ricciardo didn't, and Alonso didn't pit it because actually the problem that George had, because in the next lap they came in, and then Mick Schumacher stayed on track hoping for a safety car. They even told him.
That's it. His engineer even said, didn't he? He obviously saw the flurry of cars coming in to change over, and his engineer even said, "We're hoping for a safety car." And you think, okay, it's a gamble, but actually, if it paid off, you'd be thinking that's brilliant. Why not? It's a gutsy move, but actually, yeah, it didn't come to fruition because it just got a bit drier at the end of the day. It didn't get any worse, and people just get more and more sort of bedded into the actual conditions, which is a shame for him. But yeah, it was a bit of a gutsy move.
Yeah, and actually that's because the wet tires actually throw so much water everywhere that the track dries up really fast.
Yeah,
and so it was conditions for Inters in no time. Like 1 lap, it was conditions for Inters, which is crazy.
They're saying the wet tyre is like the world's most expensive but effective Hoover, because the way it disperses the water is actually unreal, and actually in no time at all creates a really not dry track but a much drier track to actually be able to race properly on. So like you say, it obviously cleared a lot of the standing water to make the Inters a lot more manageable as well.
Yeah. And actually what we had was finally again the MSC, the 3 letters in P1 again.
Love to see it.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest, I was never a Schumacher fan. Never
really
liked him.
No?
Never liked him. But yeah, it was nice to see, and with all that happened with Michael, it's very nice.
It's a nice story more than anything, isn't it? Yeah.
And actually I like Mick a lot more than Michael, to be honest. I must admit that all I've been hearing in multiple podcasts with people that really know him personally, I have a different idea of him now as a man. But
okay.
As a racing driver, I really don't like him, to be honest. I didn't. I'm going to be. We're going to lose a few followers now. If you have,
don't be controversial.
But I don't really like Hamilton as well.
Oh, that's fine. I don't either.
I know you're not the only one from here, but and it's on the same level that I don't like him, but I respect him, and I have no problem in saying that Hamilton is the best F1 driver ever. I have no problem with that. I say that, and I don't like him, but I say that.
No, like you say, you got to respect what he's accomplished. no matter how much he's changed maybe as a person over the years and all the circus that goes with it, you got to respect what he does in the car. And like you say, we're into that era now with Verstappen's kind of following that same trajectory that Hamilton had, and you think Verstappen could be a multiple world champion over the years to come easily. So it'd be interesting to see how he handles that over the coming years as well. But
if Red Bull continues even half decent, Verstappen is going to be the new best ever.
Exactly. So you've got to respect what they do once they're in the world. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, I mean, they're in good cars regardless, but still, they're almost like, I mentioned how Verstappen was almost like a cheat code, where he's going around the outside at the start of the actual start of the race, and that could continue for years. So you've got to respect what he can do. And he's on a different level like Hamilton was. So I may not like him as a person, but I completely respect what they do.
And as a disclaimer, I was not excusing Messi from the last year's criticism, because I like Verstappen. I actually don't know who I like less, Verstappen or Hamilton. I don't like none of them.
It's a really tough time because I didn't know who I was rooting for. I just wanted it to be fair. I wanted it to be done under the right circumstances. But who do I actually want to win? So I don't know.
I just want a good fight.
Yeah, exactly. I want it to be fair ultimately, and it just
actually. Do you know actually what was the time in Abu Dhabi last year that I started chatting at the television? Was lap 1 when they just let Lewis go on the I was like, they are taking, and my wife was looking at me screaming, they are just sealing the fight for the championship. They are just sealing, because we all knew that Verstappen had to be in front to have at least a little bit of a shot. So but I don't like none of the two. Not Verstappen, not Hamilton. I respect the hell out of them anyway. But we had Mick, but then Mick just went backwards really quickly and they pitted him. At this time we had Vettel and Latifi in the top 10, which was nice to see. Very nice to see. And it was entertaining to see, because it's always entertaining to see drivers struggling with the track conditions, because you really see the racecraft in them. But it was not one of those races where we had, like, Hamilton had loads of downforce in the car, too much downforce, so he wasn't able to pass Ocon. The Alpines were mega in Japan. Japan. The only thing that really happened was Alonso pitted for new inters and then came from outside of the points to go to P7.
The battle he had with Vettel was fantastic. Two wily old champions. Really, you could tell. You couldn't see it, but you could imagine they had massive grins behind that helmet.
There's a video on.
Oh, really?
I think it's F1's YouTube channel that you actually see. They overlay the two cameras of the cars, and then they put the front camera like towards the drivers, and you actually see Vettel's eyes, because they have the clear visors, because there's not much fighting, and you actually see where he's looking and all that. It's very interesting. It's crazy.
That's very cool.
It's very cool. You have to search it. I think I can try and put it on the show notes and look for it.
That's pretty cool. But that was a great little tussle to see. I saw a replay of it again, I think yesterday, and I just love watching it, because you think those two guys must have just, the years they've done that kind of thing, like wheel to wheel and those kind of situations, the respect there between the two was fantastic. You thought, this is just wanted a few more laps of it, to be honest. It would have been really good to watch, but no, that was pretty cool to see.
Actually, Alonso raced Jos Verstappen in F1.
Yes.
You think about it. It's a scary thought. I remember Alonso coming into Minardi and all that stuff. So it's very, very cool to still see those guys, and the guy that's going to replace the other one at Aston Martin. So And the other thing that we had was the tension that was Perez catching Charles Leclerc, and he caught on to him very quickly once the Ferrari tires just went off the cliff. But then, Charles was doing some very good lines, and it's exactly what we were talking about, the rubber on the track and the grip and the greasiness. So the place that you saw that the most was at the hairpin. Charles just went on the outside and then so much more traction out of the hairpin. It was crazy to see.
Almost like a slingshot effect. It's just so weird to see. But yeah, it's a bizarre concept to do it, but it certainly worked well for him. And some of his lines, for people who don't necessarily know from outside sport, watching it for the first time, I think, what is he doing? Has he made a mistake, kind of thing? But then you see the traction he gets out of the corners, and it's just really wily of him. And like you say, the tyres had clearly fallen way off, and he was struggling. So he had to do whatever he could, but just about managed to hold on to it as well, because another couple of laps and Perez would have had him.
Yeah, you actually could see in the end of the race, Verstappen's tires were like new. You almost could see the tags on it, and it's crazy because he was so fast. He actually finished the race almost 25 seconds ahead of Charles. It was crazy. And Perez tires were actually quite nice, and Leclerc's tires were like slicks. It was crazy. The amount of thread that he was, But that's what we were talking about. Ferrari being a good qualifying car, but not a very good race car, and that's because they are able to put so much heat into the tires so quickly that it just turns into that. And we had the last chicane incident because in the last chicane, that's the last chicane of the track, and in the last lap, Charles actually went off. He aquaplaned off the circuit and cut the chicane, the famous chicane where Senna and Prost crashed, and Senna went on and was disqualified in one of the most bullshit penalties in in Formula One history. But
very true.
He went on, and then the crazy part was that he went on, and then when Perez came and had much more traction and was going to overtake him, it just squeezed him out, almost out of the track. It was a very scary move. Very scary move.
Yeah, it was a bit, and I think it got picked up on the commentary as well. That you could tell they were a bit on edge. What kind of just transpired in front of them, and you think that could have gone a bit pear-shaped again. Unfortunately, again for the drama of the last lap and the last corner, it was up there. But at the same time, you got to imagine it could very easily gone a whole lot worse, unfortunately. And he was a bit lucky he got away with that one, I think.
Yeah, it's that I don't know what saying, dichotomy. Does that word exist in English? Yeah.
Yes.
That I think it was very showing in Senna, actually, but now we see it more in every driver, that they are so aware of driver safety, but when they are racing, they almost forget all about it. And you can see that Leclerc shut the door and then had second thoughts about it, but the damage was done. So and actually they finished the race. The race actually finished with Verstappen, Leclerc, and Perez. But then when they were actually Verstappen did his interview with Johnny Herbert, and then it was Sergio coming, and it was announced that Leclerc had a 5-second time penalty for gaining a lasting advantage in that corner, and that promoted Sergio Perez to second place. 27 seconds, so even more than 25 seconds.
So
at this time, it was a little bit of confusion because even in Portuguese commentary, and I only have access this year, I only have access to Portuguese commentary. They were all talking about percentages of races and percentages of points. And it was with full points, Verstappen needed to win the race and have the fastest laps to basically just win the championship. He didn't have the fastest lap. And then if he didn't have the fastest lap, it would need to be Sergio and then Charles, and not the other way around, because Charles actually had 2 more points than Sergio, if I'm not mistaken, in the start of the race. But then there was that awkward moment that Johnny Herbert just said, so this Charles just had a 5-second time penalty, so this changes everything to you, Max. You are the 2022 world champion. And he celebrated, and then someone said, no, you don't have it, and then it was chaos.
It's just crazy. I mean, even during the gap between the original red flag and the whole question mark around whether the race was going to restart again, the whole of the broadcast team on Sky were basically just saying, due to the time constraints, we're not going to complete X amount of laps. We're not going to do the distance required to achieve full points. So it's going to be a case it's going to go to the next Grand Prix. And they continued on that narrative right the way through. And I remember when I'd been out watching it on my phone because I was outside, and I came back in and I was just doing something to help my son out with something. I looked at the telly and it had a banner scroll on the bottom saying Max Verstappen is crowned like 22 world champion. I was like, what? Hey? But they've been saying the whole time that he can't win it here, and the confusion was insane. And then, like you say, had the whole 5-second penalty for Leclerc, so that moved everything around, and everyone's just like thinking, what on earth is going on? And I did what any normal person does and go to social media and see what everyone's saying on social media. And I looked on there and I was like, no one seemed to have a clue. And everyone was basically saying the same thing. This is getting a bit much. It's a bit of a joke. It's a top tier of motorsport, again, allegedly. It's F1. We shouldn't be having this at this point in the season where you're crowning a world champion. And even he's like, am I? Okay. And there's no like celebration. It's just like, am I really? Is it? Do I have to wait for someone to officially tell me? It just seemed a bit of it's not the way you'd want to win it. And I think fair play to Verstappen, because in the interviews, he gave a really good sort of response in terms of, rather than saying, this is a bit of a joke, I didn't even know I'd won it. He was very open and sort of said, I've been told that I'd won it and this is great. Obviously, it may not be the same as last year, obviously with the whole drama of the final round and the final lap, and the emotion of that was obviously heightened as a result. And this is very different because he came in not knowing, he knew he won the race, but I don't think at that point anyone really understood what was going to unfold in terms of, well, by the way, you are world champion now. Okay, do I have to wait for that to be ratified? Can I celebrate? What happens next? Kind of thing. Just in confusion. Even in the driver's lounge when they're mic'd up again and they're toweling down, having their water, it didn't look like anyone was really celebrating a world championship in it. It's like, well, that's really disappointing. It's like, it's his second one. It should be a big deal. It's back to back. And it's just like, am I?
Yeah, actually, Max always said that the first one was the one that he really wanted. Everything that came, it was just an extra. And
it's a bonus,
to the FIA and F1's credit, they never said it wasn't full points.
No. It's just purely. It's more the commentary and the broadcast.
I think it was where the doubts came from. It was from the commentary and from the teams that didn't know the rules all that well. And actually, today Andrea Seidel, the team principal of McLaren, said, "Yeah, we are to blame because we were given the rules before they were They came out and we all said yes, and we didn't know what happened. So
didn't know what they agreed to, basically. Did they?
Yeah, basically.
Very honest of it.
Yeah, I like him a lot. It was it's a very good guy. So what happened basically is the rules changed from last year to this year because of the Spa.
Was it Spa?
Confusion? Yeah. And basically the rules say that if a race stops under a red flag and is not restarted, it's if there's a certain amount of laps, there's like categories. So I can actually pull up and show, because someone did a diagram and it's actually very good, apart from some lines are not straight, and it's from Reddit, and I ended up, my OCD was...
Did you redo it?
No, I didn't redo it. No, I didn't redo it. So I'm going to show it like this. Sorry for everyone that it's watching on YouTube and I'm just doing. So
there we go.
The rules are this. Has a race leader taken checkered flag? If he has not, and at least 2 laps have been completed not under the safety car. If not, no points. If we have the number of laps without a VSC until 25% of the laps, we get column 1. I think it's 25% of the points, I think, actually. And then if we have 50% of the laps of the race completed, no, it's 25% of the laps completed gives you 50% of the points, 50% of the laps completed, which was what we got.
Yeah.
It's 75% points. That wouldn't be enough for Verstappen to win it. And then if it's 75% of the laps, it's or more, it's full points. So what happened here was there is another article that says that if the race ends, if the leader sees the checkered flag, and we have more than 3 green flag laps, it's full points anyway. Doesn't matter how many laps we do. So it's just a confusion. Probably it's an error. It's probably going to be changed for next year. But yeah, that's the rules, and you have to follow them. And like I said, for F1s and FIAs, they never said it wasn't full points. It was a confusion by all of the media and all of the teams and all of the... Yeah, we went through the whole 40 minutes doing maths of... So yeah, when it came to it, we were all surprised by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, we had a... Not new, but a second 2-time world champion, Max Verstappen, more than deserved. I don't think anyone is like... as much as Red Bull has been the best car, the best like whole season car, Sergio hasn't been able to do what he does. So
no, it says a lot. Too fast, too consistent.
He actually has 12 victories this year. The most everyone has done in one year was, I think it's only Vettel and Schumacher did 13. Yeah. So he probably is going to beat that this year.
I would say it's a safe bet. Yeah.
So it's crazy. Yeah, he has taken. He's always on the edge of everything. He seems he's a very intelligent driver and a fast one. So yeah, and to give myself props, I've been on track with him in iRacing. I even have photos. Yeah, and it's crazy. Yeah, he just passed me. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Daytona LMP2, but seeing his car control for a couple of laps, a couple of corners, not laps, corners, because I wasn't able to follow him. But yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, it's you certainly do see something special there. Something very special, and it's a very well deserved.
Yeah, exactly right.
And
and
there is there is a very nice photo of him, Hamilton, and Alonso in the end of the race. Both of them congratulating Max. Yeah, and it's very good, very nice to see.
It's what you want to see.
Yeah, it's 100% what you want to see. 100%. So yeah, that was our race. So we had Max P1, Perez P2, Leclerc P3, Ocon with an excellent P4, Hamilton, which he said it was one of the most fun races he ever had this year. Yeah, even though he wasn't able to pass Ocon. But we all know he loves the track, and he actually said he didn't comment on the tractor thing. He said, I don't really have an opinion on that, because he was on one of the drivers that was on the safety car, and he didn't see much, nothing about that. And he said that the restart time was perfect, and I think I have to agree with him. Yeah, we had very nice conditions, and a good 40 minutes of racing with the conditions. I think it was the best we could expect, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then P6 Vettel, P7 Alonso, P8 George Russell, P9 Latifi with these first points of the season, and let's hope it's not his last points of his F1 career. Maybe
he could go on a high.
Yeah, go off on a high and onto WEC. Probably. I think he's actually a very good fit for WEC.
Yeah, it's interesting to see if he can make the transition.
Yeah. And then in P10, Lando Norris salvaging 1 point for McLaren this race. Yeah. So yeah, that's our top 10. We only have 2 DNFs, which was Carlos Sainz and Alexander Albon. So yeah, that was the story of the race. We're not going to talk about cost caps and nothing.
That's for another pod, I think.
Yeah.
We need more information on that.
With more information, more towards the end of the year. So yeah, that was it for us. A very nice podcast, very nice long podcast. I just have to... Oh, sorry about that. Thank Jay for being here, and I think Earl has even more to thank you.
I'm happy to stand in for Earl anytime, not a problem.
And you're always welcome, and we have to do more podcasts about F1, but one about your experience in endurance racing, because I think it's one of very interesting. I'd like to hear.
It's not just sprint racing and club level and stuff like that. There's a lot more I've been involved in as well, which I'd happily share. I've been very fortunate, I'll say that much.
And I think you'll have quite a few Portuguese guys hearing, because actually Miguel Oliveira, the MotoGP rider, did the Barcelona round last year with KTM. Very nice.
It's a great series.
Yeah, great series, and it's very interesting because it has many different cars. It's not like the WC, which you have those categories, those fixed categories. Exactly. No, it's almost like hill climbing, that you have 10 different categories and subcategories.
Exactly.
They
were more, when we were doing it, they were a lot more as well, as I will enlighten you to, because we were one of the cars that was the lower rungs, shall we say, because again, budget restrictions and that kind of thing, but hey, we're out there with the big boys, so it was very interesting. We'll go into that in more detail
in the future, so you can expect that. So again, thank you, Jay. So you can follow the podcast at the handle Bump Draft Pray in every social media app that you can find, not TikTok, because we are not 12. If you want to send in a question, you can actually ask anyone, and you can actually ask Jay if you have questions about the Creventic series. You can ask and send those questions to bdappodcast@gmail.com. I've been your host, Pedro Barbosa. My handle on Twitter is Pedro Barbosa SR. I don't even know why I promote this, because I turned my Twitter app on like once every month, but I'm trying. And with me I had Mr. Jay Mooney, Well, one question. You have nothing to do with the sponsorship there are on the Aprilias. I think it's on the Aprilias on MotoGP.
No. This is massive. So it's an Italian bank, because they sponsored some of the Ferraris in Ferrari Challenge, and suddenly they're on the Ducatis in MotoGP. I'm like, I've got to find out what this is. And it's just an Italian bank, but my surname is Celtic. It's Irish/Scottish. So to be an Italian bank, it's like, it's great for me because I've got great, wallpapers on my computers with like Mooney on Ferraris and stuff. So I'm happy. But there's absolutely no link, sadly. But I am definitely going to try and get sponsorship because, hey, it's got to be worth a shot, right?
Yeah. So you'll see some team, unnamed team. We cannot talk about it. Maybe sponsored by Mooney.
And it won't be me.
It won't be Jay. So yeah, thank you, Jay. You can find Jay at Jay Mooney Racing on Twitter, and we would like to thank you for being here with us, and Ivo, thank you, Ivo, for dropping by. Thank you, Carl, for the nice comments on YouTube. Like and subscribe. I always forget that. Like and subscribe on YouTube. You can follow us at any podcast app that you can find. We are in all of them. And so thank you, and I'll see you, everyone, next time.
Cheers, Pedro.
Cheers. I did a thing. Yeah. Sorry, listeners. Sorry. Bump, Draft and Pray is an independent podcast, and the music was by Letting Punks Know.